So where or what level or, when do we go from this is experimental to non-experimental? Like I was talking to somebody, I won't even give like the how I know them kind of relation, but I was talking to a person. This was 2021 because I asked like middle of 2021, like asked this person if they had gotten vaccinated, and they're like, "That's my personal information." Like, your personal information? I was like, "That's a no." I might have told this story with more details already on this show, but whatever. The thought I had around that was, or one of the things that was said was like, it's experimental. And fast forward a few months, that same person got COVID and got maybe Paxlovid. I don't know, got some sort of, the monoclonal antibody treatment. I was like, that's experimental too, but this person didn't seem to have an objection to that because this person was sick at the time.
I don't remember. I know that we've had this story. I don't remember if it was more detail on the show or not. But
I'm remembering now. Sorry, I was going to say, I'm remembering now that it was more detailed because it was more about the conversation I had after this is my personal information. And I went into more detail about that the conversation that ensued after that. But that was before this person got sick and had the monoclonal antibody treatment.
Okay. It's a good question. I don't really know what changes the designation from experimental to non-experimental.
I mean, obviously, there's a point where you've accumulated enough data to be like, we know what we have. No, we're never going to say we know what's going to happen. It's like, but we have a high expectation that this is going to happen almost every time like this. So, I mean, there is a point where we're like, okay, this is no longer considered experimental, but I know somebody was talking about some drugs that they're being prescribed now pretty often, and he's like, it's been like, there's like 7 to 10 years of research on this drug, and it's like, it seemed like then it's like, okay, this doesn't feel experimental. Like the vibe I got from him about it is that it doesn't feel experimental anymore. But like, I don't feel like in 2021 or even 2020 when the first responders and the frontline workers got the vaccine, it didn't feel experimental to me then.
I think part of that is just because you had a similar approach to it that I did, where there was a bit of a dive into the technology behind it and how long it had been in development and what it actually did, and trying to understand this thing because it was something that we hadn't really heard of before. That's right, because I remember in very early March of 2020, or sometime towards the end of March, when people were talking about vaccination and so forth, I do remember thinking, it's like, I'll get the vaccine, no doubt, but I'm okay being at the end of the line. And you're right. We spent a lot of 2020 reading about science that we had not read about before, and maybe don't read about anymore because things have gone back to normal to some degree. I won't say it's fully normal because, like, the whole time I've been traveling, I've been wearing a mask because I don't want to get COVID again. But I listen to a lot more. I listen to a podcast about virology today. What is it? It's called TWIV. Yeah, This Week in Virology. Yeah, listen to that a lot. I don't listen to it anymore. It was around the time that I got vaccinated is when I stopped listening to it. I don't read as much information about it anymore, for sure, but it is funny. So I'm pretty sure I've mentioned it on the show. If not, then this will just be an extra insight. But I use Day One for the journaling app, but I don't use it specifically for just journaling. I put in reference links that I want to keep track of, because you can do, like, I have
a dozen or so journals. And so I have like a personal one where I'll put notes, right? But then I have one for travel where when I travel, I'll take pictures, make notes on different things. And then I have one for news and reference that I want to clip or save, that kind of thing. And like I have some others too. But one of the features that I like is on this day, and it gives you, for however long you've been using the app, everything that was put in on that day over the past X number of years. And so I'll see a lot of these articles pop up that I had saved when I was reading about what mRNA vaccines were. And of course, different articles on actually the COVID itself and how it's suspected transmission and everything else. But seeing those pop up are interesting reminders of how much information I was consuming on a regular basis about it, trying to understand it.
Yeah, I mean, we spent all the time, all that time that we would normally spend partying was spent reading about vaccination and disease and so forth.
A lot of it, anyway, for sure. I don't know that I would have spent the time partying otherwise, but
I'm just making a joke.
I know. I'm just
the most social thing I could think of at the moment.
Yeah, I was just adding in the reminder that I'm old. I don't party anymore. I have gatherings.
Yeah. As I think the last time I had a house party was like right before the pandemic, and yeah, it was around Valentine's, and I was like, I'm not doing parties anymore. This is not a thing I want to do anymore. I just want to have folks over.
So, quick side tangent. Interesting, just note. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned it on the show as well, but I know you and I have talked about it. We've been just kind of looking at how the housing market and figuring out, where we want to go, that kind of thing. In one of the conversations, apparently one of the asks is to have a entry and living space that is conducive to having a friend over regularly, which I didn't realize that ours wasn't necessarily fitting that. So it's just been fun having those conversations about what we're looking for and things like that.
Yeah.
But I mention it because it sounds like the toll of not having social interaction as much over a couple of years has going to lead to us entertaining at least some friends on a more regular basis once we do relocate.
So is your partner a introvert or extrovert?
It's tough to nail down completely. Definitely more extroverted than me.
Yeah, that's not a fair comparison.
I know, because I don't care. I can be a recluse or I can be out in the middle of a gathering. It's whatever. But I'm perfectly happy in my home and not dealing with people. So there's definitely a need for social interaction that I don't have. But I would say that it's a fairly even mix between the two.
So maybe a bit of an ambivert.
Sure.
And you're a bit of a pervert.
Yeah, I'll take it.
Yeah, I know you will.
The talk about the moving from experimental state to non-experimental state is kind of interesting in light of a couple of articles that I perused, and I didn't read them in drastic detail. But one of the things that was kind of that I know I've hit on before is I don't understand certain mindsets. Like I just don't get the logic and rationale behind them, and part of it is that I can very easily look at evidence to the contrary for a lot of beliefs. And so this idea of the psychology of conspiracy or looking at different alternative belief structures from a social and societal viewpoint and those roles on leading to or believing more easily conspiracies or false information are just two articles that were kind of fascinating.
Yeah, the one article about people with paranormal beliefs spooked by science and the COVID vaccine. Is that West Virginia University?
It is.
So I'm reading the title. Sociologists suggest. That is the title, right?
The title of the article was different on the West Virginia page than the Apple News link because it was written by somebody else. So I think the Apple News link has a title about the sociologists, or leading with that. The West Virginia University Today, the original article is what I typed in the note that has the link.
Gotcha. Yeah, it's a thing you hear, basically if you believe that the paranormal is real, and you're probably less likely to you're less inclined to accept what others or what science is putting out, I guess. And so that's super stupid.
Just to give the overview of the article, previously researchers have focused on religious beliefs in general, mostly conservative religious beliefs. And one of the things that the sociologists in question here were curious about is whether alternative belief structures also had a similar effect. And so while it's fun to point at, belief in the supernatural or the paranormal is kind of the lead for the article, it was trying to focus more on non-mainstream religious beliefs. So if you believe in the power of healing crystals, for example, you are more likely to be distrustful of science and not have as much faith in the vaccine.
Healing crystals, I forgot about those.
Yeah, I wouldn't have thought about it either if it hadn't been called out in the article as a reminder.
So where does do essential oils fit in here somewhere? Because the essential oils people.
Yeah, I believe so. And I want to also emphasize that we're going to make fun of it a little bit because it's just kind of funny to us. But the original goal of the research, the inquiry, was very much just to see if it was only mainstream conservative religious views that were that distrustful of science in general and having this effect on people not wanting to get vaccinated or believing even in some of the dangers of COVID, or if it was any alternative belief structure that is at odds with science in general. But it is hilarious. I mean, really, I would not have imagined a headline like this 2 years ago.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting to me because, one of the things that there's a mention of parapsychology, and I wouldn't have really known what parapsychology was, except for that there was some examples, and it was like mind reading or telekinesis. But the thing about that is, I really wish telekinesis was real. I'd be down for that, because if telekinesis were real, then we could all fly, because you'd lift your body up and fly. But I always thought about
telekinesis is the moving of stuff with the mind. Telepathy is the reading of the mind.
Yes.
Yeah. It takes me a second to remember which one's which. Yeah. Communication.
I always remember telekinesis because of kinetic energy. That's where I think the kinesis is. I suspect same root word.
Yeah, I would believe so. That's how I think about it. When I go back and I think through the words, that's how I come to my conclusion each time about which one's supposed to be which.
Astrology, I always find that one amusing. I'm not much into it, but I like when people want to ask me what my sign is and tell me things about me, and sometimes it's really interesting it's this is not just a vague thing that could fit anyone. It's there's a little more to it, but I also lump that in with like Myers-Briggs kind of thing, like personality tests and that sort of stuff. So I don't think it's, well, it's just, it's an interesting thing. Some interesting overlap or descriptions of like who people are, how they tend to be. I don't know.
Yeah, I do think a lot of alternative views, I think is probably the best way to put it, are interesting in varying degrees, especially when you talk about Western medicine versus Eastern medicine as a good example, or is that the correct?
Yeah, I think so.
Eastern, is it?
Yeah,
I never remember
Eastern,
if it's just Eastern medicine or if it's like ancient Eastern medicine or traditional. I don't remember if there's. I never remember if there's another disclaimer there.
So I think that if you were to go to like a large city in the East that practice medicine and looks similar to what you would find in the United States or other parts of the Western world, they would probably still consider that Western medicine, even though it's geographically there. And it's like Eastern medicine is a bit different. But I wonder if Native North Americans' way of medicine would be considered Eastern medicine, even though they are Westerners before we were.
Good point. That might be something it might be something to look into a little bit. Or realistically, more than likely, nobody ever asked, and a lot of those thoughts and ideas have probably been lost over time just because of our general treatment of Native Americans.
There's only just like single-digit percents that were left over, that were not decimated. Yeah.
But where I was going with that, though, is that I do think there are a lot of benefits to non-Western medical practices and beliefs that do at least bear some foundation and worth of exploration and application. Even though you could say that a lot of it is either not supported by science or at odds with a number of things scientifically, there is also just the practical lifestyle evidence, I guess you could call it. It's tough to say evidence specifically, but
we can say anecdotal evidence.
That works. And you have the same kind of thing with some of these other subsets of alternative beliefs and practices. For example, you have groups of people who go the like astrology route, like you mentioned, as far as thinking it has a fairly significant influence on personality and behavior. And there may be some overlapping component that does make certain people that are born at different times of the year more stereotypically in line with certain personalities based on region or something else. Like there's enough at play that we don't understand that it's not necessarily complete rubbish, but it's probably a false correlation.
Yes. Yeah. I think it's really, really important to understand that understand the difference between correlation and causation. I don't know if I've talked about this before, but there's a great website that I'm blanking on the name right now. That does a great job of demonstrating correlation with causation. I think it's like spurious findings or something like that.
I know you've mentioned it on the show before. I don't remember which episode, and I don't think we linked to it.
Yeah, and there's several different places that have their spurious correlations, and I think one of my favorites was like the number of people who drowned. So I think it was like from like 1999 to 2009, so a 10-year period. The number of people who drowned by falling into a pool correlates quite well with films Nicolas Cage appeared in. Stuff like that. It's like there's no way. I think the website's like spurious correlations. I think if you search for spurious correlations, you'll find some white graphs with red and black lines overlapping to just show like these two things that correlate well, that are definitely not causative. Like Japanese passenger cars sold in the U.S. Correlates really well with suicides by crashing of a motor vehicle. It's a little bit dark. Sorry.
Well, the other part of it is just thinking about kamikaze planes.
Oh, I got one more that I got to say. The divorce rate in Maine correlates quite well with per capita consumption of margarine. So yeah. The thing I was just thinking, like, you made a comment like this is not supported by science, and it's like there's a couple of reasons why something might not be supported by science, and one of them is that it is not a thing or not true, or that's kind of the obvious one, or the one that we tend to go to. But then the other one is like something isn't supported by science if it hasn't been studied, where it's not that's a no, but it's like it's an I don't know.
Yes, that's a good point to make. Because I know I often, while I think about that, I often fail to mention it explicitly as well. Because especially when you talk about like nutrition science or the ideas behind certain spices, the consumption of a certain quantity of spices, for example, turmeric or garlic, or those are the two that come, cinnamon. Those all three I know have been a focus of articles and fitness and health magazines in general as well. And a lot of it is just that there's not a good way for us to measure it either, because there are also problems with sample selection when you get into something like this too, because you also have ethical concerns about if you have people who don't volunteer for a study, you can't necessarily force them to consume things either, because that's unethical. And realistically, the only studies you could perform would be, with regard to these, would be with voluntary participants, but then your pool of participants may or may not match across a large swath of the population. It might be fairly specific to generally healthy individuals, or gym goers. There may be some factor that's more common in your sample population that's not actually applicable to the broader population. So your ability to correlate your findings to correlate's the wrong word. I will probably remember it at some point, but to apply those findings from a statistical perspective to a broader population becomes less confident.
I think studies about humans are kind of interesting because, like, on one hand, it's like we're very similar. There's not a lot of difference between this human or that human, or this group of humans or that group of humans, or this ethnicity and that. There's a lot of very similar, like very same sort of things, but at the same time, there's so many maybe like micro differences that are vastly different. It's kind of a weird, I don't know, it's a weird thing to think about how much the same and how different we are.
Oh, absolutely. I mean,
that makes the science tough.
Yeah. Not even talking about like the differences in like how air quality in a region could affect things, or water quality, or other environmental factors isolated to one population group could manifest a different set of results based on interactions with other things. So, the more diverse and more global your sample size, the better, is really just all it comes down to.
Yeah. So these sociologists found that basically, if you believe in, I'm trying to throw all this in one bag here, but I guess non-mainstream beliefs correlate with a lower likelihood of getting the vaccine and trusting science.
Yes, in a nutshell, yes.
It feels obvious, but here's the data to back it up.
Right. And that's kind of what I was mentioning when I was talking about, we know there are plenty of studies about mainstream beliefs and the lack of trust. The whole point of this study was just to actually perform a study emphasizing this other piece. And it's always funny when we talk about sociological studies in general, because a lot of times the questions seem extremely obvious because it's what we're accustomed to seeing play out. But it's all anecdotal if you don't actually study it. And so if you don't go through the effort of surveying a population and getting enough of a sample size to be indicative of an actual trend, then we could say all day long that, sure, lack of trust in traditional science or modern science, and I don't remember which phrasing they used specifically, but lack of faith in science, of course, is going to limit your trust of the vaccine or likelihood of getting the vaccine. That sounds obvious.
Yeah. It's all going to be anecdotal until you do the proper research. So, but one of the things I thought was, which came first, the chicken or the egg? Are you distrusting science because you have these beliefs, or do you have these beliefs because, rightfully so, there are many people that do distrust science, and because of certain experiences that they've had from bad actors or ignorant. I mean, there's a period of time in not too long, people still alive who've experienced not just bad medicine, but just downright unethical practices. So I'm kind of like, which came first?
It's an interesting question when thinking about the other article, because I had a similar thought. There are plenty of times where we can point to a single life experience that changes the faith in any particular point of authority, be it, loss of faith in government is, of course, a big one. Loss of faith in science and medicine. Take your pick. There, plenty of people will happily tell you stories about how, because of this thing that occurred in their lifetime, they don't trust it anymore, kind of thing. Which is actually hilarious on a different level, and I'll come back to that. Like that, bite me once, and all of a sudden I don't trust you, but I'll happily let my partner bite 30 times, and I'll still keep trusting them, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But the other article talks about the psychology of conspiracy, and the reason I say it's fascinating when you think about that particular article is because if you change the word conspiracy to just be the psychology of alternative information, then it starts to make a lot more sense, because you latch on to something based on experience that changes the narrative for you. And so I'm going to read a particular line real quick that kind of, I think, explains it.
Is it the first line?
Yeah.
Because when I saw the title of the first article, I was like, okay, that's cool. But like when I read the first line, I was like, oh, this is very interesting. So please proceed.
So the first piece, and I'm going to just quote verbatim from the article. There are 3 fundamental psychological needs that must be met for humans to flourish: competence, autonomy, and relatedness. When these needs are not satisfied, people seek to fulfill them. Conspiracy theories generally take hold following an adverse event that diminishes an individual's sense of control, autonomy, ability to make sense of the world, competence, and connection to others, relatedness. And that perfectly encapsulates what I started out with, where if you changed conspiracy to alternative belief or alternative information. Because just taking an example of you had a medical visit and it was technically malpractice. Well, of course you are losing a certain amount of control over that situation and autonomy. And of course you would be less trustful of another doctor until a rapport was established and things were moving in a better direction. But depending on the other circumstances or what other beliefs or pieces of information were presented to you during that time, you could latch on to something because it makes you feel better about the situation, or you feel that things are improving as a result of this thing that you latched onto. There's an emotional attachment that supersedes rational thought.
That those two sentences, I don't want to say it seems obvious because it's not. I don't think it's obvious, but it feels more like there was this concept in my head, and I would never have been able to articulate it so eloquently. But it's like reading those two sentences feels like it puts so much into focus.
Yeah, part of why I liked this article is because I know I've made the comment a number of times that I don't understand conspiracy theorists or certain groups of people. And it's an overly blanket generalization, because it's not that I don't understand how you get from point A to B. How you go from not necessarily being completely 100% in on this false belief structure. What I continued to fail to wrap my head around was how you could be all in on this belief and refute evidence to the contrary. And this helped immensely in wrapping my head around that piece.
Yeah. So one of the things I thought about, and it'd be interesting to see the study on this, but folks that have experienced this, it's like, what sort of experiences that occurred at a young age that were imprinted upon them deeply to move into a direction where this is their worldview? I mean, I have an idea of what I would expect to find, but I don't want to say like I know this is what would happen, because like I don't, and that's why we do a study.
Yeah, I think there would be a lot of things that you would look at and say, well, that makes sense, or that feels obvious. But I'm willing to bet there would be a lot of things that seem innocuous enough that it's the right combination of factors over a short time frame that might actually be really difficult to pinpoint.
Yeah, I think there would be plenty of things that are like, oh yeah, that's obvious. Thanks for giving us the data to like say, okay, this is backed by science. But I think there would be a lot of surprises as well.
It would be really interesting to see another. I would probably do it as a separate study, something that approaches the similar topic, but age of that kind of transition. Like, is it really something early on, or is it across the board, any number of different range of ages, but it's these common things? And it just so happens that these sets of events occurred over, a 10-year period. And so everybody that remembers those 10 years, regardless of whether it was early or later on, has followed this trajectory or not, kind of thing.
I think you could probably, I would expect that the findings would lead to, there are a group of people, they got to this point because of these sort of experiences, and here's this other group of people, they had this type of experience, this different type of experience that had the same end result and so forth. So that's kind of what I would expect to see.
Yeah, it would make sense to me. I guess what I would really like to see is a true study into the influence of specific organizations and agencies in the media, and whether repeated exposure to those influenced this type of outcome.
Yeah, the trickiest part about all of this is that a lot of this would require studies based on people's recollection, and we know that those recollections are not accurate. So I feel like it would be quite a difficult study to conduct.
Yeah, it almost makes you wish you could still have experiments like the Stanford prison experiments, or other things that predated a number of the ethical restrictions now applied to studying humans.
I'm kind of okay with these ethical restrictions.
Yeah.
In lieu of the data.
Yeah, me too. And I guess for anybody who happens to listen that doesn't know, Stanley Milton, I think it was, performed the Stanford prison experiments where students were separated into a couple of groups. One group were supposed to be inmates. One group was supposed to be the corrections officers, jailers, whatever term you want to use. And the experiments had to be halted because the authority and willingness to obey orders it got out of control quickly. And this was how we came to understand a lot about human behavior and the influence of unchecked authority, and how it leads to very nefarious actions taken on subjects under the purview most of the time. I'll add a link to at least the Wikipedia article, if nothing else.
I had a thought in there, but it has escaped me, and I apologize.
Sorry. I remember when I first ever heard about the experiments, I thought that was fascinating, because it was one of the questions that you hear often is, how come the Nazis as a whole, nobody stood up to or stopped or said no, or refused orders or something like that? And it's just not the way human behavior works typically.
Well, I mean, I'm sure there were some very early on, and guess what? Bad things happen to them, and it makes, that's the whole point of the bad things happening to those people, because it makes other people think twice about doing it. It's, you put fear in people, it's a thing. Fear's powerful.
And subsequently, not every, or I don't believe every military organization has the same caveats with the oaths that are sworn. For example, U.S. military soldiers are sworn in to defend the Constitution. I don't remember the full thing, but it's protecting the citizens of the United States in accordance with the foundation of the government itself. And so if orders are given that violate that oath, you're supposed to say no and not follow those orders. And actually, if you do follow those orders anyway, can be subject to disciplinary action kind of thing. And obviously it's a lot more convoluted than I'm trying to describe it as. But I don't think every military has the same caveat on whether you can question orders, because even in the American military, you'll hear plenty of people talk about you don't question orders. Your role is to follow the orders of your commanding officer.
There's a whole movie about that based on a true story.
Yes, there is, and that was a nice long way of trying to rope that in. Would you inform people of what that movie is?
It is one of my favorite movies, if not my favorite movie, and that is A Few Good Men. I think that was Aaron Sorkin's first screenplay, or first it was so it was actually based on his sister. His sister was the lawyer that defended Downey and the characters that are represented by Downey and Santiago. So the actress Demi Moore, yeah, she was the one who portrayed Aaron Sorkin's. She was the character that was based on Aaron Sorkin's sister. So it's not like it's a true. It's his story is. Well, actually, it was a play. Then it got adapted into a movie, and it was based on a case that she was a part of.
And in line with everything else that we've been discussing, one of the best lines from the movie was delivered by, or one of the best sections in the movie occurs with Jack Nicholson's character proclaiming, "You can't handle the truth."
You strenuously object? Oh, she strenuously objects.
Yeah, it is a fantastic movie. Anybody who hasn't seen it should absolutely go see it.
Yeah, it is. It's excellent. It stands the test of time for sure. I will say that I've seen where people have taken like amusing filters and put that scene on the "You can't handle the truth" scene on their TV, and then hold their phone up to the filters and record. It's pretty good.
I haven't seen those, but I'll have to. I'll
find one. I'll find one and send it to you.
So back to the psychology of conspiracy article, real quick. One of the other things that just helps explain the initial gravitation toward alternative information, I guess is a good politically correct way to put it. This is also directly from the article. Quote, "People adopt conspiracy beliefs to regain a sense of control in a situation that feels out of control. They seek information that reinstates their perception of competence and autonomy. When this information isn't available, they may engage with non-scientific explanations." And I wanted to call it out specifically because, one, I already mentioned that I can at least understand the transition from point A to B, from not believing some misinformation to being 100% all in on it. That makes some level of sense to me. And that's specifically what this particular piece of the article is talking about, is that if you go back and take, we'll use the COVID vaccine as an example, the information provided was not always clear throughout the initial part of the COVID response and understanding
Absolutely.
the virus.
Yeah.
The messaging around the vaccine was not overly clear depending on your sources. And even then, a lot of it was either not in-depth enough of an explainer or needed some additional correlation of information to really get a grasp on, which just means overall, like the presentation of information about COVID and its transmission and the research into the vaccines and the vaccines themselves, all of it was somewhat murky for the general public to consume.
Right. Even if you set aside like how quickly information was being gathered and how quickly our understanding of what was actually happening was changing, set that aside, there was still some messaging that just was not ideal.
Yes, and it's easy in that type of arena when you think about what this quote is talking about. If people can't look and get the information easily or relatively clearly, they will certainly seek other information that is presented more clearly or communicated in a way that makes more sense to them. And then you start to see where it makes sense for people to say, oh, well, this nurse or medical student or, just someone where there's some general conveyance of that person should know what they're saying. And that's all it takes for someone to latch on to either a misunderstanding of information or just misinformation because of it not being, not reaching the point of having that body of knowledge available to pull from yet, that can easily lead to somebody's friend or neighbor or acquaintance of some sort saying something in a way that the person then says, oh, that makes sense. I kind of want to go dig into that a little further. I want to do a little bit of searching on whether this might be a thing, and all of a sudden it's easy to convince yourself of whatever you come across because you're seeking out that type of information in the first place. Does that make sense, or was it overly vague?
No, it's clear to me.
Okay. And it's fascinating to then think about if you add into this mix the actual types of people who spread information, you have a perfect storm of events for it's kind of amazing more people don't believe the conspiracy theories around the vaccine, for one example.
Yeah. I mean, but you see, occasionally you'll see bad actors that will take advantage of people and their willingness to search for a different understanding of the world because they're trying to seek those three things: autonomy, competence, and relatedness. It made me think of the QAnon conspiracy theory and the documentary that sort of, I feel, there's a decent smoking gun at the end of that, so I thought it made me think of that.
And there's a book that I've read. I will look up the title real quick, but it specifically talks about the spread of information and misinformation from a more the scientific approach or method of how to get information to spread. Like it's not necessarily an easy read for non-academic circles, I guess is a way to think of it. That it's not like it's trying to say how specific thoughts have spread or anything else. It's not like it's a case study book necessarily. It is very specifically explaining the different ways in which information spreads and how propagandists and conspiracy theorists and marketeers and scientists and like all of these different groups of people interact and overlap, and how information becomes more prolific depending on the different weights and circles and interactions of those particular groups, kinds of thing. It's called the misinformation age, and I'll probably include a link to it in the notes if I remember. But it was a fascinating read for sure.
Just hearing you say the misinformation age, it kind of hurts.
Yeah. The title is definitely trying to evoke a response to get people to pay attention, for sure. And I think it unfortunately won't reach the market or the audience it needs to reach because it's written academically instead of being written as a exploration of a specific subcomponent of misinformation.
Yeah, I mean that's kind of how it mostly is in the world.
Yeah,
it kind of reminds me of two quotes that I heard as a teenager that have stuck with me my whole adult life, and one of them came from a daily calendar that has different sayings, and it was it's easier to jump to conclusions than to dig for facts, and I loved that. And the other one was, don't always believe what you read, but do read what you believe. Don't always believe what you read what you believe. The thing about reading what you believe is that's an easy way to get stuck into a particular in a way of thinking, in a belief, or in a mindset that is hard. It's a way to become entrenched, and so it's very important to. That's why diversification is important.
Yeah, it's interesting. The second one makes me think. My mind immediately goes to a self-sustaining prophecy kind of mentality. or an echo chamber, or
Yes.
pretty anything that you come up with or think of that is self-affirming prophecy is what I was thinking of, not self-sustaining, self-reinforcing beliefs.
No, I think I got the quote wrong. Don't always read what you believe, and don't always believe what you read.
That makes more sense.
Yes, I got it wrong. I was saying it. I was like, wait, this doesn't feel right.
Yeah, that I would count as sound advice.
Yes. At first, I was like, this sounds wrong, and is this supposed to be advice of avoidance? But no, I just got it wrong, and I apologize.
It's always funny to me, the phrases that stick with you, because like the first one about easier to jump to conclusions than to dig for facts kind of thing.
Yeah.
Every time I hear the phrasing "jump to conclusions," my mind immediately goes to Office Space.
Yeah. No, I mine did too. It's funny when I do say it's easier to jump to conclusions than to dig for facts. I never feel like people like, you're not appreciating how wonderful that concept is. I always feel like that goes unappreciated, or it's not properly appreciated. Let me say it that way.
Yeah, I have no illusions that most people take the time to think about and dig into information that they consume, unless it's about a field that they're very passionate about or that directly affects their livelihood. For example, most people, I would assume, kind of skim news headlines, if they even look at them at all, and don't really question what the headlines convey. They just get a sense of what's going on. Maybe there's a headline that entices them to read a little bit of the article, but there's no correlation of that article with something else. There's no checking to see if this one particular piece that you happen to consume contains more analysis than it does reporting a fact, or a fairly even blend of both, or is omitting something that another source might give. That's just not the way people tend to consume news. Instead, it would be if you're a healthcare worker and there's a headline that catches your eye about a specific virus making its rounds or uptick in infections or something, you're probably more likely to dig into that one. Maybe corroborate it with a couple of sources to get a feel for, is this something that I need to be concerned about in my area or region, or is it localized somewhere, that kind of thing. The types of questions that people should ask about a lot of the other things that are reported in the news that they just don't.
Did I lose you?
No. That was the end of the statement. They just don't.
I misheard that. I'm sorry.
That's fine. The whole point is just people don't.
They don't
dig in.
Yeah. It's there's. I used to be very critical of that, and I feel like because it's easy for me to look at the people that don't dig to the level that I dig and be very critical of them, and then it's less often that I am noticing the people that dig more than me and who might be justifiably as critical of me as I am of those other people. And it's because it's not because I'm such a great digger. I wouldn't say that at all. It's just that it's easier to look at. Maybe this falls into the category of like this. Is it knowledge bias? I can't remember. I can't remember what the actual name of the phenomena is. But basically, people who have knowledge of a particular thing look down upon people who don't have that knowledge. Do you know this phenomena?
I do. I don't remember the actual name for it either. But it's very similar to the overall. It's easy to judge someone for not putting in the same level of effort into something that you do. and it's more difficult to recognize the people who put more effort in on the same thing as kind of extreme in that regard. There's a general bias to your approach where deviations from your approach feel either lazy or excessive.
Yeah. That's because you're doing it right, and you know you're doing it right, and everyone else is doing it wrong. So,
and that tends to fall into confirmation bias.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I was thinking just that.
It's amazing how many different words we have for these different ways that our minds work and reaffirm our personal approaches to things.
Or how there's so many aspects of life that fall into these same categories in one way or another. Were there any other things that you wanted to talk about from this article?
No, those were the main things. It just at a high level, it was fascinating for both of these to kind of blend together in a way that was interesting.
Yeah, I'm still sort of really appreciating that the first comment from the article, the second article, and I do remember the thing that I forgot. We were talking about it's good that there are certain types of experiments that are no longer being performed, but I'm like, there's a certain set of experiments that are being performed quite often that I don't think that could be funded if they were actual experiments. They are, let's see, what's the word? They're improperly performed experiments in the form of reality television. There are certain reality TV shows that I think that occur that if you're trying to do a scientific study, you probably wouldn't be able to do it, and there would probably be some level of like a disapproval for that. But you give people a certain amount of money and they volunteer to be on a TV show for entertainment. Guess what? We can do a poorly performed experiment and record it.
Yeah, I follow the thought. I do wonder how much of it could even be called an experiment with how much is definitively staged after. Right. When you hear about the stuff after the fact.
Right. That's what I'm saying. Like it's an incredibly poorly performed experiment because you have producer interaction that's trying to evoke a certain response and not allowing things to happen out properly. But it's still people doing a thing. It's still certain things can't be controlled.
And either way, I guess technically it fits the definition of an experiment. It's just not a controlled experiment.
Right. It's not a good experiment. And I love, that thing that people said when people were saying, no, I'm not going to get the vaccine. It's too experimental. And it's like, oh, guess what? It doesn't matter because you're part of the experiment. If you don't get it, you're the control. We have a number of different ways set up for you to get in touch with us to provide feedback, ask questions, or just comment in about something we've discussed.
You can hit us up on Twitter or Instagram at untitled_hosts, or shoot an email over to untitled.hosts@gmail.com.
Or get in touch directly with Jesse at jthart.com, or get in touch with me, John, via telepathy.
If you would like to support our work or are interested in listening to our new after-show feed, head over to patreon.com/theUntitledPodcast and take a look at the options we have set up.
Thank you for listening.
We hope you've enjoyed the show.
And we hope to connect with more of you as we continue this journey.
That's a wrap.